Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we will be recapping Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the New York Islanders. Now, the Islanders were looking to do what the Golden Knights were unable to do just yesterday, which is extend a series to a Game 6. The Islanders trailing 3-1 coming in, and it starts off pretty well for them. Ryan Pulock scoring a goal on the power play to take the 1-0 lead late in the first period. Then, early in the second period, the Lightning would get a goal from Hedman to tie it up, and that would be the only scoring we'd see for the rest of regulation, barring a Tampa Bay goal that ended up being called off of one of the most obvious offside challenges I have seen in these past few years since the instatement of said rule. We would then head to overtime, and in the first overtime no goals would be scored, but in the second overtime it would be Jordan Eberle scoring his fifth of these playoffs to take the 2-1 lead for the Islanders, to make the series 3-2 in favor of the Lightning and keep the Islanders alive here in the Eastern Conference Finals, trying to find Dallas in that Stanley Cup Finals if they can do so. Good news for the New York Islanders is, of course, the big one. They won, which is obviously huge because if they had lost, they'd be gone. And so getting this victory, even if it was not necessarily the most well-played victory, is of the utmost importance. It should also be mentioned that Semyon Varlamov played yet another spectacular game for this team. He's really stepped up here in the past couple of games thus far in this series, and he ends up getting the outduel onto Vasilevsky, which is not something a lot of goaltenders these playoffs can claim. Only really Korpisalo, I guess, could actually say something like that, but Varlamov able to do that here tonight, and he's going to be very, very important in Game 6 and in the potential Game 7 if the Islanders want to win in this series. I think it's pretty clear through the first 5 games here that the Islanders are just a worse team than the Lightning, and so if they want to get these victories, not only do they need some good bounces to go their way and some great plays from their team, but they also need some fantastic goaltending, and they got that here in Game 5. Bad news on the Islanders side, it does have to be the fact that, this was not the most well-played game still. It's not necessarily, they're still not out of the woods. It's not necessarily going super well for them. And right now, they're in a situation where most of their games are sort of defend, and then try and capitalize on one-and-done chances in the offensive zone or transition rushes in the offensive zone. And this is something that is going really against what we saw earlier in these playoffs from the Islanders. Earlier on, it was, of course, still a lot of defending, but when it came to the offense, it was a lot of heavy forechecking in the offensive zone, physical play to try and get these pucks away. I mean, so many people praised the Islanders for having multiple second or third lines, checking lines that can really just pressure the opposing team's defense, force them into mistakes, and score gritty style of goals with a surprising amount of skill from the likes of players like Clutterbuck or Brassard or even like Matt Martin. But that hasn't really been the case here in this Tampa Bay series thus far. There hasn't been this necessarily super heavy forecheck coming from the side of the Islanders because the Lightning just are seemingly able to solve it each and every time. So as I said, the Islanders, depending on this run and gun style of offense at times, it does end up paying off for them in the case of this Eberle goal. It ends up winning them the game, but not necessarily a formula that's super good moving forward. Now, I guess the good news in that situation would be that on the other side of the bracket, we saw the Dallas Stars perform something pretty similar to this against the Golden Knights and win it in just 5 games. So it's not as though the Islanders are completely out of this series, but it is going to be tough as such. On the Lightning side, the good news for them is, of course, they're still in a pretty good spot in this series. They still do have a safety net. Even if they are to lose Game 6, they're still not out of the playoffs. They'll still have that final Game 7. And so things are still looking pretty good for the Lightning. They're still in a very good position in this series. Things are still looking rather well. On the offense wasn't great here, but as long as they don't fall into the Golden Knights trap, they should be fine. The defense was solid. Vasilevsky does get outdueled, but he was still perfectly fine in this game. One player who I do want to mention on the Lightning side does have to be Victor Hedman. He's been so fantastic in these playoffs for the Lightning, again scoring their only goal in this game, certainly asserting himself as one of, if not the, honestly, you could definitely make this argument, definitely asserting himself as one of, if not the best defenseman in the NHL, not just left in these playoffs, but in the entirety of the NHL through all 31 teams. He's been that good in these playoffs for the Lightning. On the bad news side for them, it of course, once again, comes down to Braden Point. He's just such a critical point on this team, no pun intended, just brings a lot of offense and defense. He was I believe 4th in Selke voting this season. He brings a lot to this Lightning team, and the proof is there. In the 3 games in this series that Brayden Point has played the majority of the game, or all of it, the Lightning are 3-0. In the 2 games that Brayden Point has either not dressed, which was the case here tonight, or did not finish very much of, I believe he only played about 8 minutes in Game 3, the Lightning have lost both of those. Now, these are, of course, very small sample sizes, so it doesn't mean that if Point is not available for Game 6 and 7, that the Lightning are guaranteed to lose, and it does not mean that if Point is available for Game 6 and 7, they're guaranteed to win, but it does show that he does play a huge role on this team as a top-line player, especially without Steven Stamkos in the lineup. And so, if this is a situation where Brayden Point did indeed re-aggravate his injury in that Game 4, Sharks fans are somewhat familiar with this situation. Erik Karlsson, just last season, he had gotten injured around halfway through January. He didn't play for a while, came back for a few games at the end of February, didn't look good, re-aggravated injury, didn't end up playing the rest of the regular season, returned in the playoffs, but still heavily injured. If this is something where John Cooper decided to jump the gun a bit, trying to get him back into the lineup as soon as possible, in that Game 4, Brayden Point made what was maybe a minor injury significantly worse, this could mean big problems for the Lightning. Now, that's all complete speculation. For all we know, Point is back for Game 6 and the Lightning are perfectly fine, but still, that is definitely the main thing to keep watch of in this series, because a Lightning team without Point is still good, but definitely not just significantly better than the Islanders. But that will do it for this recap. In terms of my prediction, I had said the Lightning would win it in 6 games, with the Islanders getting this one. That is now a very big possibility. If the Lightning win Game 6, that will be the perfect prediction. If Point is back in the lineup, I definitely can see that happening. If not, while it's still a possibility, we may end up seeing a Game 7. Class dismissed.